I'm Daniel. My parents passed away in a car accident during the winter of my third year in junior high. At that time, my younger brother, John, had just started elementary school and needed a lot of help. Our relatives were kind, but they all had their own problems, so they couldn't take care of both a 15-year-old and a 7-year-old. We had no one to rely on. Even though I had plans to go to high school, I decided to give them up. Instead, I started working at a local construction company. While my classmates went to high school and enjoyed their teenage years, I worked long hours, sweating from morning to evening. It was tough. People who didn't know my situation thought I was either bad at school or misbehaved, which made me feel awful sometimes. But raising my little brother was more important to me. I didn't want him to feel lonely, and I wanted him to live a normal life. So, I worked hard every day, doing house chores and helping him with his studies at night. I spent all my time taking care of him. Thanks to that, John grew up to be a smart and hardworking young man. He did well in middle school, high school, and eventually went to university and got a job. He's intelligent and hardworking, and I'm so proud of him. When John went to college, a relative who helped him financially said, "It's because of you, Daniel, that John grew up so well." That made me prouder than ever. One day, my little brother brought home his girlfriend. She was the daughter of a wealthy family. She was polite and seemed smart. I wouldn't call it a mismatch in social status, but considering our situation, it felt like that. John was clearly in love, but I felt a bit intimidated by her elegance. We didn't have many women around the house, so I didn't know how to act. I was nervous, but she was kind and polite to me, treating me as her boyfriend's brother. I envied John for having such a wonderful girlfriend, and I wanted to make sure they were happy. I wanted to be close to my sister-in-law. Since then, John's girlfriend came over a few more times. Even though she seemed uncomfortable in our small house, she was usually cheerful. I thought she was getting used to us. When they decided to get married, I was even happier. However, about a week before the wedding, I got a phone call from John's girlfriend. She sounded upset, and her tone was different than usual. "Brother-in-law," she said, "about John's and my wedding next week, could you not attend?" I was shocked and asked, "What do you mean?" But she went on without listening. "Well, my family is pretty well off. I can understand John being there because he's smart and handsome, despite his background. But for someone like you," John's girlfriend said, "Daniel, you don't have the education or job background to be part of our family, and that's a problem. It's not just about me. I can't put my parents through the embarrassment." She was very clear, not holding back her words. John had told me he liked her direct attitude, but to me, it felt cruel. "I understand I can't change the fact that you're John's brother," she continued, "but at the very least, I'd like to pretend you don't exist. I'm asking you not to come to the wedding and to stay away from family events. Can you do that? For John's and my future?" Even though her words hurt, I couldn't argue. My whole life, I'd worked for John's happiness. I couldn't go against that, even if it meant missing his big day. "I understand what you're saying," I replied. "I know I don't have the education or career to fit in. If my not being there will help you and John, I won't attend the wedding. Is that okay?" "Yes, thank you so much," she said, sounding happier now. She said goodbye in the cheerful voice I knew so well and hung up. After the call, I felt completely drained. I slumped to the floor, exhausted. Even though I agreed not to attend the wedding, it didn't mean I wasn't upset. It hurt that someone who was going to be part of our family, John's wife, thought of me that way. What hurt the most was not being able to go to his wedding. I wanted to bring our parents' portraits and celebrate with the four of us, as a family. But I couldn't deny the truth. My education isn't great. And my job history isn't impressive. I chose to give up on school. So the one to blame is me. I felt like I was ruining John's big moment, casting a shadow over his important milestone. I felt deep self-loathing and spent the whole day feeling depressed. Later, John came home from work, and during dinner, he talked about the wedding, the reception, and their future life together. But because of what his fiancée had said, I couldn't bring myself to join in the conversation or be cheerful. "Daniel, what's wrong? Are you feeling sick?" John asked, worried. I didn't know how to respond. I'm not good at lying, and when I'm upset, I usually speak up. But I didn't want to say anything bad about the woman he was about to marry. Still, if John felt the same way as his fiancée, I would accept it. I could bear not going to the wedding if it's what he wanted. So, I gathered the courage to be honest with him, even though I was afraid it might make him dislike me. "Your fiancé told me not to come to the wedding because I'm not someone to be proud of," I said. "If you feel the same way, just tell me. The last thing I want is to be a burden to you. If you don't want me there, I'll stay away." John's face filled with anger. "You really think I'd say something like that?" he shouted. "I could never think such a cruel thing about the only family I have." After calming down, he thought for a moment and said, "Daniel, how about you not coming to the wedding? Just like she said, please wait for me at home. Is that okay?" I was shocked and asked, "What do you mean?" But then he explained his reasoning. "There's no point in attending a celebration where someone says such awful things to you, Daniel," he said. On the wedding day, even though I was told not to go, I was still worried. I'm the only family John has, and I couldn't help but be concerned if something went wrong or if there was any trouble during the event. I decided to secretly attend the wedding in my brother's suit, even though I had been told not to come. But when I arrived, everything seemed strangely quiet. I approached a staff member who looked worried and asked, "Sorry I'm late. How far along is the ceremony?" The staff replied, "We can't start the ceremony because none of the groom's family has arrived yet." "What?" I was shocked. They led me to John's dressing room, and I asked him, "John, why haven't our uncles and aunts arrived?" He calmly replied, "That's right. I told them not to come." "Why would you do that?" I asked, confused. "If I told them what you were told," he explained, "they'd say, 'We're the same shameful relatives who couldn't help you back then, so we won't attend.' That's why nobody's here today. I just thought I'd eat the food and leave. No point wasting it." I was stunned. "This is ridiculous," I said, shaking. "Why would the whole family go to such lengths? This was supposed to be a day of celebration for you." John saw my distress and reassured me. "I loved her. But I can't forgive her for what she said to you. Our uncles and the rest of the family feel the same way. If she can't accept you as family, then I can't be part of hers. I'm thinking of calling off the engagement." Just as John finished, his fiancée burst into the room in her bridal gown, clearly upset. "How long are you going to keep me waiting? We're already past the start time." John replied calmly, "None of my family is coming. Daniel didn't come here for the wedding. He's just here to see me. Let's have our meal and call it a day. As for us, we can't get married. I want to cancel the engagement." "What? You can't cancel the wedding at the last minute?" she cried, red with anger and embarrassment. John, still calm but firm, replied, "You said some terrible things to Daniel. After knowing our family's situation, you still hurt him. At first, I was shocked at how low you could go, but now I see that's just who you are. You only judge people by their achievements, don't you? Unfortunately, I'm also what you'd call a failure, raised by another failure, so I can't marry someone who doesn't respect my family." She started to cry, but John didn't stop. "I'm just being honest. I can't marry into a family that thinks it's shameful for the groom's family to include a high school dropout who works in construction. I stood there, hearing everything. John defended me, and if I stayed silent, it would only make things worse for him. This was a problem between her and me, but even though she might have been right about some things, it hurt to be looked down on by someone who knew nothing about me. Yes, I might not be the smartest or have impressive credentials, but I've lived my life doing my best to protect my family. She had no right to insult how I've lived. As she cried hysterically and I spoke loudly, the guests and staff started to gather. Everyone heard her hurtful words. Her parents, realizing what had happened, bowed their heads to my brother and me in shame. I thought you had finally found a man to marry, and now you're saying these things. I thought I could finally relax, knowing you were moving out. Her father scolded her, holding his head in his hands. We're so sorry, he continued. It's partly our fault for spoiling her. Please forgive her. Her mother, wearing a beautiful dress, had an embarrassed and apologetic expression, bowing to us as well. Even her friends, who had come to the wedding, didn't defend her. No one stepped in to help. They all just stared at her in disbelief. For once, she didn't have anything to say. Maybe she realized how bad things had become or finally understood the mess she had caused. John spoke up. I was 7 when our parents died. My older brother, Daniel, gave up everything to take care of me. He started working right after middle school, sacrificing so much. His life isn't something just anyone could live. And even if I were in his position, I don't think I could have done it. Just having an education doesn't mean you can live a life like his. I knew this when I was 7, but you couldn't understand. You're less mature than a 7-year-old. I can't marry a child, and I don't want to. So, I'm calling off the engagement. I don't want to see you anymore. With that, John apologized to her parents for canceling the wedding and then to the staff. Though he was polite and respectful, it was clear that his decision was final. She, who had ruined one of the most important days of her life with her own actions, could only stare blankly at the scene that had unfolded around her. You have a family who scolds and protects you in times like these, right? I said to her. My younger brother, John, was even angrier than I was when he heard about our phone call. For me, while education and work history are important, John is far more important than any of those things. Knowing that he refused to marry someone like her actually made me feel relieved. She started crying again. It seemed like all she could do. The wedding was cancelled before it even started. After that, John really did break off the engagement. Since they hadn't submitted their marriage papers yet, there weren't any legal steps to take. He cut ties with her quickly. Later, someone who attended the wedding shared photos of what happened online, and it seems her family lost their social standing because of it. She probably won't be able to date or marry for a while. John says she took care of all the costs for canceling the wedding, which is only fair since she caused the mess. We didn't have to worry about it, and for that, I'm thankful. I don't know anyone else who would get so angry on my behalf, not just because we're family, but because John respects me as a person. Even though this wasn't the best situation, I realized how strong our bond as brothers is. I'm really proud of John for growing up to be such a great person, even without our parents. Encouraged by him, I decided to study for my high school equivalency exam, something I'd been thinking about for a while. A year later, I passed the exam and changed jobs. It's in a completely different field, but learning something new has been fun. I also got my first girlfriend, and she values me and my family. I plan to introduce her to John soon. I can't wait to brag about my amazing younger brother.